Good evening. We'll start in alphabetical order as usual. Andrea Scarborough,
Present.
Bilal Key, Diane Song Yu, Gil Lopez,
In attendance.
Janet Ferreira,
Present.
Jasmine McPherson, Jennifer Maldonado,
Present.
Jenny Lynn,
Present.
Angela Moore, Catherine Servino, Mac Lawrence,
I'm here.
Rachel Boglin,
I am here.
Richard Nunez Lawrence, Ruth Essa, Susan Latham,
Here.
Toby Shepherd Block,
Present.
Vanessa Ventola, it's me. Okay, Community Board 1, Antonella Di Severio,
Present.
Community Board 2, Frank Wu or Laura Shepherd,
Present. Laura Shepherd.
Community Board 3 has let us know they're not in attendance. Community Board 4 has let us know they're not in attendance. Community Board 5, Walter Clayton Jr. Community Board 6, Patrina Schneiderman.
Here.
Community Board 7, James Servino. Community Board 8, Susan Cleary.
Here.
Community Board 9, Regina Santoro. Community Board 10, Amanda Debra or Emily Chang. Community Board 11, John Kelly. Community Board 12, Reverend Carlene Thorbs. Community Board 13. Community Board 14. Cures, Mary Arnold.
Present.
Guardians of Flushing Bay, Rachel Wu.
Here.
LIC Partnership has let us know they're not in attendance. Mr. T. Carding, Adam Mitchell.
Here.
NYC H2O, Ryan Brenner.
Here.
Queen's Botanical Garden.
Present.
Is that Evie? Evie Hansopoulos?
It's Evie.
Evie, pardon me. Queen's Chamber of Commerce, Rona Davis. Queens County Farm Museum, Sarah Meyer.
Present.
Great. Sutphin Boulevard Bid, Glenn. Tully Environmental. Waste Management. Okay, we have quorum.
Perfect. And I think there were at least 2 people who joined, and Richard is joining. He's in the process of joining. Oh, Allison is a guest from our friends at the other SWABs. Perfect. So we can go ahead and get started. The first thing on the agenda is just approval of the January minutes. So do I hear a motion to approve those?
It's Susan Latham and I make a motion to approve as written.
Wonderful. And second?
Mary Arnold, second.
See Mary Arnold second. Okay, great. So does anyone have, oh, perfect. Thank you, Richard. Does anyone have any discussion or changes to the minutes that they wanted to raise? Great. So all in favor of approving January minutes as written?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, so the minutes have been approved. The first order of business for tonight is a discussion of committees. So we don't have a guest speaker tonight. We have two kind of internal business things to discuss. The first is committees, and the second is some proposals from the bylaws committee. So first, in regards to committees, just a reminder that folks should join a committee and engage with at least one of the committees. One of the amendments in the bylaws kind of clarifies that, which we can discuss a little bit later. But if folks are currently not plugged into a committee, we're doing some reorganizing. So now is a perfect time to get involved with that. In terms of the committees that we have right now, we have the legislative committee. We have a combined version of the communication and education committee, and then we have the environmental justice committee. The planning committee at their last meeting, and maybe someone can give an update towards the end about what this is anticipated to look like, but that's kind of being put on hold as we're responding to things more and can restart that committee later on. But for the time being, it's being put on hold as an ad hoc committee. Yes, yep. Thank you, Gil. There's two kind of options I wanted to talk about specifically with regards to the organics committee. And yes, you can definitely give an update when we do committee updates, but basically, so the first question is, there is more of a model now than in the past of having these all SWAB committees. So one example of that is the NYCHA recycling committee, and Bilal has volunteered to represent QSWAB on that. And basically what that looks like is, I think it was originally organized by the Manhattan SWAB, and now I think with Bilal joining, all 4 SWABs have at least one representative on that committee. And it's just a way to work on issues across the SWABs. So, we have the potential to collaborate on a lot of things. I think the legislative committee meets quarterly with the legislative committees of the other SWABs. So we're already doing some of this. In terms of like an organics committee, there's as Gil mentioned in the chat, there are organics committees on the other SWABs. There's coordinated efforts between those. One of the things that we raised, though, was whether we wanted to restart the organics committee. And similarly, there was interest in potentially having a small business and or commercial waste committee. And so what I wanted to kind of open for discussion was just whether there was an interest in, now that we're down to 3 committees, whether there was any interest in someone working with others, but taking on the chair role for a QSWAB organics committee and a QSWAB small business or commercial waste committee, or whether it makes sense to continue expanding into a kind of all SWAB, particularly the all SWABs organics committee, because with the latest news from DSNY, the other SWABs are interested in both helping to facilitate the current Queens version of curbside composting, and then also assist with the rollout citywide. So I'm wondering if folks have thoughts on restarting the organics committee and creating a new small business committee. And I'll open the floor for thoughts on that. Yeah, Gil.
So I was asked, I think you asked me if I would want to chair the organics committee, and I think it's worthwhile to have an organics committee for the Queen SWAB, but I don't have the bandwidth right now to chair that. And I don't know how much bandwidth I would have to be a part of that committee and then go and report back and be a part of the Manhattan SWAB Organics Committee and keep the overall coordination. So I think it makes a lot of sense right now at this capacity to just join the MSWAB Organics Committee and kind of like work through that channel. Unless someone else is really excited, and unless there's multiple people who are really excited about starting the SWAB Organics Committee. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Well, I think an organics committee would be great. If it's one that's organized, that has a goal and has direction, and have folks that there's the buy-in from our SWAB that they will indeed be involved and step up and be active. The reason I think it's important is because we have the rollout coming out the end of March, and we're still the first borough to have this curbside composting throughout all our community boards. We know we have issues around apartment buildings, and we want it to be successful fully, completely. And to me, it would make sense to have a committed, repeat, a committed organics committee, because right now composting is a hot item. And it would be nice for us to have a committee to help get it right for Queens. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'd add, and then I see Susan's hand. I think what we were doing when we decided to put the pre-existing compost committee on hold was kind of distribute the responsibilities to the other committees. And so I think, just as you said, like, we'd want to make sure that if we do restart this, just like a clear division, like if there's a new committee, the other committees might focus less. I mean, I think composting is something we'll be focusing on a lot, particularly because we're the only borough at the moment. But we do have, and maybe we can do an update from Gil as well if it's relevant now. But I think there is a large interest in the other SWABs, particularly around the Queens composting program. And so whether that means that work is done through that inner SWAB committee, or whether we start one of our own that has folks from the other SWABs come to, I think it is important that this one kind of hits the ground running and immediately kind of takes on some goals. Otherwise, I do think it makes sense to keep the tasks divided into the current committee so that we don't lose any ground. So Susan, I saw your hand, so I'll call on you, Susan Latham.
So, I mean, I have to say that what Gil said in terms of working in coalition with the other SWABs, I think makes a lot of sense. And I don't know that we have enough people who are willing to serve on, I mean, I know we have some issues with committees. And so rather than having a committee, and Gil, tell me how you would feel about this. What if we said that Gil is the chair of our organics committee, but there is no real committee? But Gil is our representative as the chair of the organics committee if you are interested in working in coalition with the other SWABs. And but I think that, I mean, the big thing that that SWAB would push for is to have organics collection, which we are going to have, and the other committees are doing things. The other committees are trying to educate and communicate about it. And it seems to me like what we are is an advisory role. And I think it's really important for us to be able to talk with the other SWABs and work with them so that they can learn from our experience about what it is that DSNY does. And we'd have a louder voice working in coalition than on our own. So I agree with you, Andrea. It makes sense to have an organics committee, but I don't know that there is the bandwidth within SWAB at this point to have a fully functioning committee. But I do feel strongly that it's important to let to work with the other boroughs, because we're all going to be composting curbside in the next year or two, and they can learn from us. And
Could-
Gil, forgive me for volunteering you, but I think that's kind of what I heard you say, is that you'd be interested in working with the others. And I would say we just call you the chair of our organics committee, and there's no committee per se.
Can I speak?
Yes, please.
Allison Allen is here from the Manhattan SWAB. She's the chair of the Organics Committee. And I think it would be good to hear from her if that's okay.
Yeah, Allison, if you want to, and then I see Adams in the chat. We'll come to that as well. But Allison, why don't you talk about the Manhattan SWABs committee?
Yes, I was gonna try and raise my hand as well, so thanks.
Got it.
Mary. Yeah, and I just want to clarify, none of the other SWABs have a really have organics committee. Brooklyn SWAB used to have a committee. The chair moved away, so they have been joining the Manhattan SWABs organics, for a few months. We have someone from the Bronx SWAB that joins. They talk, everybody wants to have a committee, but we all have the same problem. Not enough people to do the work, and it's work. But we are all focused. I mean, Gil and Mary, Gil and Mary came to the last meeting. We're very focused on Queens. Obviously, your success impacts our success. We're going to learn a lot from you. So that's why, we have a lot of people that really do want to figure out how we can help and how we can learn from you. We have legislation about mandatory organics. We've got, budget hearings. We want to, make sure there's a good budget. But, it's really an open invitation. There's nothing really formal. Our meetings are open to the public. So I would just encourage anybody who wants to come. Our meetings are the second Monday of the month at 5:30, pretty much regularly. We rarely reschedule it. I mean, if you email me, I'll add you to my email list and you'll be notified about meetings. You'll get the agenda. And, I would welcome, and I always welcome agenda items. If you have something you want to discuss based on stuff you're seeing in Queens, we want to know, because that's exactly what we want to know. I benefit a lot from coming to your meetings because I've already heard some really good information about what you're seeing. So I think it's great. If we're all trying to do the same thing, we're all happy to work together. So spread the the limited resources that we have.
Thank you. So I saw Gil and then Mary's hands.
I'm open to whatever. If y'all want to call me the chair of a committee that we don't have, that's fine with me. I don't really care about the titles. My phone was acting up during the meeting, and I thought it might be nice for Allison, if you don't mind, to give a little report back. I don't want to take too much time I know this is time for report backs for all committees, and we've been talking about organics and we haven't even been given a report back yet. I can, Allison, if you're comfortable doing that, that would be good too, I think.
Yeah, let's see. Am I muted? Oh no, I'm not muted. Okay.
You're good.
Well, I kind of touched on some of this stuff. We obviously talked about the mayor's announcement, the rollout of its expansion to every single borough. So Manhattan, we're the last, so that's another reason why we really want to learn from all the other boroughs. We shared an announcement that they're not even accepting enrolling new buildings in any of the other districts prior to any of the other boroughs prior to when the expansion actually comes to your borough. So no new buildings in Manhattan can actually sign up for organics as we understand it until we get curbside borough-wide, which is October 7th, 2024. We talked about smart bins. We are hearing, they're popping up in various places. They're supposed to get 150 more in Manhattan, but we are also hearing a lot of problems about the smart bin. So that's kind of something that, we have the chairs of all the SWABs that are going to meet quarterly with Jessica Tisch. We're hoping to kind of share some of the concerns that we've heard about smart bins. with her to kind of find out if there's a plan. I mean, I think a lot of, what we hear is that they make these announcements and there's no plan. Like even the DSNY staff didn't know about the expansion, the mayor's announcement until the announcement. So there's not a lot of people that should know about these things aren't being notified.
Or
we-
consulted.
Yes, right. No,
Notification
right.
is nice, but consultation, we're the experts. We should be consulted about these things. I
Yeah.
mean, we being Department of Bureau of Recycling and Sustainability, the compost project, like there's a lot of people that know about these things that were not consulted and didn't even know until the day after the press conference.
Exactly. And even, Big Reuse, who's, a big part of rolling out everything. I don't think you were notified, just as someone who actually, kind of works very closely with DSNY. So it's frustrating. We all share the frustration. We know it's not just us though. My only comfort is like, it's not that they're just not listening to the Manhattan SWAB or the Queens SWAB. They're not listening to anybody. So they don't seem to be. They are listening to maybe New York League of Conservation Voters because they had a primary spot next to the mayor at his announcement. So that's an interesting relationship that we want to kind of explore a little bit more. Let's see. So yeah, I talked about the smart bins. Just Queens data. Again, we want to take away the key learnings, try to find out from the commissioner what data they did collect in addition to anything published. They don't share, but we're just trying. There was some information, we wanted to find out if there was good, the infrastructure. I don't know if any of you watched the hearing today, commercial waste zones, but Commissioner Tisch indicated that they had done an extensive analysis on where the capacity is. So that was interesting. We are still waiting, for an environmental impact study. We're hoping for an update of that. I guess I mentioned, budget. We have the budget hearing in the end of March. I forget the date, but we'll want to put together and potentially another all SWAB testimony. I don't know. We're hoping, we're doing a little bit of a study. I don't have the details. I'll have more details on that for the organics committee, but that's, we want to talk to people who are involved in are already composting and people who just don't want to compost and find out like what we can do to convince them to participate in organics. I think that's it. I don't want to really monopolize the meeting, so come to the meeting. But again, open invitation. Anybody can join, and we welcome any input.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So Mary, your hand's up. So I'll go on you, but you.
Okay, just very quickly, because I know we want to move to working on our bylaws while we have quorum here. But I would just say, Allison and Gil, that it has to be more than Queens showing up and like putting something on the agenda. If we're going to have like a unified committee, it can't just be Manhattan centric. It needs to be city centric, and with the maybe some specific things for the rollout on the 27th of March. And I've been going to all your meetings too, Allison, and would certainly welcome the opportunity to bring Queens into the center of it, particularly since Manhattan won't get a rollout for another year and a half. So, and you're so creative and energetic and wonderful. And with Gil there, it's a powerful combination. So that's the only thing I would say. Queens shouldn't just be like an afterthought, or maybe we show up. It should be central to the whole mission of the committee.
Thank you. Gil, I see your hand raised.
So I'll just give a little bit of a synopsis of the Queens-centric organics stuff. The rollout happened in October of 2020. There was a pause that was announced at that time before the October rollout during the winter. We're in the middle of that pause right now. It's always been slated to come back in late March. They have the date, March 27th now. It's coming back just as planned. We have problems with people in buildings with 10 or more units being able to access the bins because the supers and the property managers have the choice to provide those bins or not. All the SWAB signed a letter encouraging Adams to mandate that supers and building managers provide the bins to their residents, but without that, there's no real good way for other residents to participate in the brown bin program. The brown bin program is an industrial scale composting program. Most of the waste goes to Staten Island Fresh Kills. Some of it goes to the wastewater treatment plant for what they call waste to energy in Greenpoint at the wastewater treatment plant at the Newtown Creek. We probably should have a robust debate about our priorities in terms of like making greenhouse gases to burn off to make energy and whether that the efficacy of that large scale composting versus smaller composting sites like the ones that Big Reuse operates. We should definitely highlight the fact that while a lot of people think that we have a victory, that the Queensbridge processing site under the Queensbridge has been saved back in 2020. It was not. We've been given an eviction date. They keep on extending it 6 months, 6 months, 6 months. Our eviction date now is again the end of this year, the end of December. The Queensbridge processing site will be evicted. It is a model for the entire country for a half acre of land to process lots of compost. It's something that we should really focus on saving here in Queens, and we need more composting sites. All of the composting sites in the city are at capacity. So we need more composting sites in the city, or else we will begin exporting waste. We're already exporting waste. DSNY is not talking about it. The numbers that they gave for the brown bin success back in early October were nice numbers, but they were not the complete picture. It's really important that we get the complete picture. It seems like they kind of just offered what was supporting and they didn't offer anything else. So the other fact of the matter is none of the schools in New York City, including schools in Queens, who were having their compost picked up before the pandemic, they are supposed to have service returned, but they never got any notification, no contact, no communication about that service returning. So they're all very confused. And a lot of the maintenance workers just refuse to put the composting out, and even though the kids and the cafeteria workers are separating it. So that is a huge issue. The DSNY has made it clear to me and my team at Big Reuse that they are not going back to schools that had service previous to the pandemic to inform them about how to participate again. They're focusing on schools in the Bronx right now.
Thank you for that update. I think what I'm hearing, and then we can move on, unless I'm mistaken. But it sounds like this model of having someone, at least Gil, if not more folks, join the Manhattan SWAB compost committee is what makes the most sense at the moment. And then I think we can perhaps leave maybe more space than the other committees during our regular meetings for a report back from Gil and a dispersion of some of that to the other committees for the month ahead. So for example, if there was like an all SWAB letter, Gil could report back on what that looks like and send that to the legislative committee if that makes the most sense. If we wanted to do some outreach to folks, that could come back and give a report back with some things for the education and communication committee. So I think that we can at least try this model of having someone from QSWAB at one or more at the Manhattan SWAB, and then come back and present and kind of divide and conquer with our other committees. I wanted to quickly touch upon the other committee, and we're in a very similar boat in that, Adam, I saw your comment here. So Charles, you mentioned that this was a committee that he'd be interested in, and it's a similar thing. I followed up with him, and he said he'd love to be a part of it, but can't take on a chair role at this time. And so, you know, I think Adam, you volunteered to help get that off the ground. I think we'd want to make sure that there's other folks that are interested and able to help. But I'm wondering if folks have thoughts on that committee, as well as making that one that the other SWABs are. I mean, our committee meetings are also all open, so everyone, whether they're on a SWAB, our SWAB, another SWAB, or just the general public's always welcome. But I see, Mary, you have your hand raised. And you're muted. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody here with the possible exception of Adam, who spends as much time thinking about commercial waste as I do in the broader sense with construction debris. I know that's not part of the commercial waste zone, but it's I just feel like we obviously are having trouble staffing even our core committees. And, you know, I don't bring my concerns about, construction debris or waste by rail into this forum, even though I spend most of my time thinking about and working on them, because I don't feel that it's appropriate for me to draw off the limited resources that we have into this other area. And I really feel like, you know, people have worked for years on composting and on recycling, the more domestic kinds of waste. And, you know, there are other venues for my work and for Charles and for Adam to pursue, rather than, trying to make this group into a group that would be an arm to serve those interests. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. I see Janet, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, hi. I was just putting some notes together what Gil was talking about, because like a lot of red flags that he, the information that was disclosed, and but definitely like when it comes to the New York City public schools, I know that the Department of Education and Grow NYC Zero Waste School, when they launched like in 2016, like they did like 100 schools receiving curbside composting, and like what they've learned like the past like 5-year program, to develop those like best practices, recycling, compost collection. So right now they, on the website it says like currently about 50% of all those New York City schools are enrolled in the program. Gil, you're saying that like they've stopped, like no New York City public schools are like, with DSNY and everything, they're participating. Like it's been kind of like paused at the moment, or just, I was trying to like gather some of the notes, like what you were saying, which is trying to like clarify like what's happening now, or eventually we'll plan on, doing the compost and everything again, but
Yeah.
it's a trickle effect, I know.
So just through my job at Big Reuse, I'm doing outreach to schools in Brooklyn and Queens, and we're doing compost education and application with them. And we're reaching out to green teams. We're like, you guys are already doing this. And they're like, oh yeah, we did it before the pandemic, but we don't know if it's doing it anymore, or we still do it, but the janitor and the grounds crew refused it. They just put it all in the trash. And there's a lot of confusion in the schools, and DSNY, they do have Grow NYC and that team, outreaching to schools. They have been doing recycling forever. They just incorporated the composting bit, and they're focusing only on the Bronx schools right now. They made it very clear to me that they are not going back to any of the schools that were enrolled in the program previous to the pandemic. If they're confused about it, then they're just up a stream. And I'm working hard to try and work it out between my contacts at DSNY and the school principals and vice principals and green team staff that I'm meeting. But it's like every school that I talk to is basically just like drifting in the wind. They have no idea what's going on. And I encourage any of you to go look at the brown bins at a school and see how much contamination is in there. There's no way that they're bringing that to a compost facility and doing anything with it. And if they are, then the whole truck is getting turned around and sent to a landfill.
Thanks for that. And just, I see Adam's hand real quick to Susan Cleary's point in the chat. I think that is how we can operate with having Gil go to the committee at SWAB and report back. I think that, you know, different parts of our organic plan can fall into the other committees. Like I'm thinking, you know, this conversation about grounds crew at schools sounds very similar to what's likely happening with some building managers for multifamily homes in the curbside program. And so, you know, I could see the Education and Communications Committee, if we wanted to put together something and work with the other SWABs to come up with something, that's something that committee could take on. So even though it is organics, it's within the realm of what the other committees, similar with legislation and obviously environmental justice as well, particularly when we look at areas that are or are not receiving outreach from DSNY. But I'll call on Adam now. I think, yeah. And you're muted.
I think Charles, in the consideration of a commercial committee, would probably be a temporary committee, because he seemed to have some issues with the LIC partnership and how they're going to respond with the new set out times. And I imagine that maybe that interest with him might last for a month or 2 months, and then we could always open it up to the other SWABs, like that concept of the organics committee being more cross-pollinated. And then I imagine that the all SWAB groups will probably pick up, you know, a commercial committee as the commercial waste zone awards happen, and there's more interest in that in early 2024. So I could help him if he really wants to move it along. And I'm not sure, he talked about having a letter, and so maybe we could help create that with him. And then I don't think there's much stopping the momentum from the DSNY rule, but he does want to express the concerns that the LIC partnership has.
Yeah, maybe we can circle back after this with some of the other groups who are not on right now, because I know we do have other representatives from bids and some others. So maybe we can follow up in an email, and obviously anyone else who's interested is welcome to join. But we can send around an email afterwards and see if there's interest in getting together and working, whether it's a formal ongoing committee or just meeting kind of on an ad hoc basis for this next period, and potentially as this becomes a bigger thing that folks are interested in focusing on, that might make the most sense, because I think it's the same kind of thing with composting, in that there's an interest, but capacity might be a limiting factor. But let's follow up and see if folks are interested, unless anyone has a comment, a last comment on that now. Okay, great. So I'm going to make a note, and Adam, I'll follow up. And if anyone on this call or watching the recording afterwards, if you're interested in joining and not reached out, I'll be over inclusive in who's on that email. But if you're interested and want to be involved, just send me an email and I'll make sure you're on that chain, and we can figure out what makes sense to do. Great.
Sounds good.
So great. So the next item we have is a proposed amendment to the bylaws. Just to clarify where we're at in this process. So the bylaws committee has been reviewing our current bylaws. There were a few kind of high priority items that we've prioritized as opposed to going through kind of the whole thing, which was what we had initially started with. So we have three major themes. And the idea is that tonight we're presenting this as a proposal, discussing whether there's anything that whether it sounds good, whether there are things that definitely need to change. And then we'll meet again as a bylaws committee between now and March with the idea of finalizing anything that comes out of tonight's discussion and then voting on it in March. So the idea is not to vote tonight on approving these, but to vote next meeting, and instead to just go through some of the wording. So like a lot of what we have tonight is kind of what we've thrown together, but if there's specifics that people think would make sense to change, we're happy to do that. So Susan, I can turn it over to you. I can share my screen with I sent around a PDF earlier. Okay, I see you nodding, so I'm going to go ahead and share. I sent around a PDF earlier. If you didn't get a chance to review it, that's totally fine. Let me see what I'm doing here. Okay. Proposed amendments. And I cleaned up some of the language. So again, this is just like drafting. So if people have issues, that's what we're discussing. So Susan, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so the first change is about defining who is in good standing. And so what we added here is a member, so all members in good standing shall be eligible to vote on board business. A member shall be considered to be in good standing if they A, attend a minimum of 4 full board meetings within the prior 6-month period, and B, actively participate in at least one committee and attend a minimum of half of all the committee's meetings within the prior 6-month period. So that's the first proposed change. And the reason that it is a 6-month period rather than a year is because our quorum, Ryan, please correct me if I'm not making sense here. A quorum consists of members in good standing who have attended a certain number of meetings within a 6-month period. So we've defined it so that it's clear to everybody what it means to be in good standing. Any questions on that?
Yes, I have one. Would this apply to the community board representatives?
It does. And it does. And we've talked a little bit about the community board representatives and about how to make sure that the community board representatives are, because we have to have a quorum, we really rely on the community board members to participate. I think that when the SWAB was put together, it was the borough president's goal to try to make sure that there was participation throughout the borough. And we're wondering if it makes sense at some point to talk to the borough president's office about slightly changing what representation means, because there are some community boards that don't necessarily have an active person who's serving on SWAB, but there may be a community group or an individual in that district who is very active. And so would it be possible for a community board to appoint somebody who could serve as the community board's representative because they have an affinity for what it is that we're doing? But yes, this would be referring to everybody who serves on SWAB.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just to say, it always did. This was always the rule for everyone. This isn't a change.
It's just that what is changed is that we have added and we've explained and defined what it means to be in good standing, because that was not explicitly stated in the bylaws previously.
Yeah, I mean, just wanted some clarity on that because from our perspective, I mean, board members, you know, it's all volunteer work. And if you go to the full board and serve on 2 committees, that's, you know, 3 nights a month. And so sometimes like we rotate just to ensure that, you know, there is a CB2 representative here. But, you know, by divvying it up, like a certain individual might fall out of good standing.
Oh, I see. So what you're saying is that rather than look at the individual, we would look at the community board.
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's.
Oh,
a
yes,
really-
we do that. Like when we have, so there's a little bit of a difference between, and maybe this is something we can add specifically to the bylaws, because that's not something that we've done, but right now, so when we have a community board or an organization, for example, that says to us, it'll either be this person or this person, we count the board or the organization as the member, and look at that. And Vanessa, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the unit we're looking at. And I think that how this would work as well is just whether the board is there. And I'll also say, you know, 2 things is, one is like good standing is not kicked off the board. And we also allow, you know, unexcused absences and are pretty liberal with that. So the idea is just, this is really, I mean, we do add a provision later about what can happen for people who are not in good standing, but really, as Susan said, the idea behind this is making sure that we are having quorum that represents people who are actively involved. You know, so if folks aren't showing up, it's not that we never have quorum. And I see Mary has her hand. I'm gonna actually open up more because I can't really see anything.
Yes,
Okay, so Mary.
I do have my hand up. What I wanted to say is, Laura, one of the issues is we don't just want people to come and, you know, we wanted to have active participation. So if it's a board, but not the same member, and it loses continuity and participation that is, you know, active, you know, because there's continuity there, then that's an issue. So this isn't like the community board in the sense of, you know, it is a public board, but you could see like it requires a lot of active participation and on committees and so forth. And that's been an issue, and you could see that tonight. So that was the purpose of bringing up that idea. You know, maybe there's someone that the community board knows who is very active in composting in the community, and that could be the community board's representative instead of an actual community board member. Now, I don't know how you feel about that.
I mean, I think that's a fantastic idea because I mean, I think, yeah, you know, the fact that SWAB is practically like a whole other community board, you know, it's a burden for individuals like to just have to do so much. But I really do like admire and appreciate the work you do. So I'd like to come and report back to the community board as well.
Right. Well, that's encouraging to hear.
Yeah, at CB2, like I always give the SWAB report.
Yeah. Well, we're of course we want the community boards there, but like, how would you feel about having to do B, actively participate in at least one committee and attend a minimum of half of all the committee's meetings within the prior 6-month period? So I don't know whether you've been to any of the committee meetings, but we also
maybe 1 or 2 at most.
Right. We also kind of need that. I mean, this is a real discussion, you know, it's a real issue.
Yeah, no, and I would love to, you know, delegate this to somebody with a lot, you know, more bandwidth, frankly. But
Because we recognize that if you're serving on the community board, that's a big responsibility and it takes up time. And then this also takes up time. And there are
Right.
several of us who are on the committee. I mean, I'm not part of my community board, but I live within a community board. And if I could be the community board delegate, yeah, that would work for everybody probably. And I think that that's true throughout every community. But that's something to talk with the borough president's office about, because it was the borough president's office, I think, who decided how the committee membership would be made up.
Right.
Right.
and Across the borough, we also need a lot more consistency on public members of boards. I would think that any member of QSWAB could be a public member of an environment committee on their respective board. And it's also problematic that several boards have environment committees that don't meet. Yeah, they're just borough-wide consistency issues on this left and right.
Right.
Definitely. I see Gil's hand, and the other thing, just to put a pin in a discussion we had is, we don't want to force anyone off who's wanting to do this. We're just trying to recognize that, like Susan said, this is a huge commitment for someone who's already serving on boards. And so I know that there are a number of community board reps on QSWAB who are coming to meetings and committee meetings and seem to enjoy it. And we definitely want people like that to remain members. And we also don't want to put barriers to entry for people to serve on the board. We're just trying to strike that balance. So just wanted to make that clear that we're not trying to kick off community board members either in this proposal. But Gil, I see your hand.
Thank you, Ryan. I just wanted to address, I think it was Susan that just said, we're here at the SWAB, we're also live in community boards. It could be us, but then that would also mean that we would need to go to the community board and kind of become citizen member or members in a capacity in order to speak at those meetings and give a report back on what's going on. I think the information flow is what's really important. And I think that's what Borough President Richards was aiming for. And I'm sorry if this is asking the same question again, but does this new proposed change, does that mean that if someone isn't in good standing, they wouldn't be able to vote, but they wouldn't be kicked off? Does that mean that if people from different community boards weren't in good standing, they wouldn't necessarily detract from our quorum, or but they could still report back to the community boards? Yeah, exactly. And that's the big idea here. And we talked about that as well, about kind of, not wanting to create situations where people are showing up and are not eligible to vote. But the idea behind this, and this was something that the borough president's office added when they added the community boards, was this mechanism allows for every community board to have a representative. But if they're not in good standing, the only thing that would do would mean that they are ineligible to vote. They would still be on the board. They could still come. They could still report back. It would just change the numbers for quorum. We have two hands. Let's do Evie first and then Mary.
Yeah, my question has to do more with who's going to determine before each vote who's in good standing. It just seems very complicated. So there has to be someone who's tracking that. Otherwise, you could take a vote. Someone who's technically not in good standing could vote, but their vote really shouldn't count. So I'm just curious about whether that was part of the discussion. I think it's good to define what it means to be a member of good standing. I'm just wondering if this is going to be really burdensome.
It was a big part of the discussion, and I had the same concern, Evie, that you did. And Vanessa is the person who is managing all of this right now. Vanessa, you can tell us if it's burdensome or not. To me, it seems like it would be burdensome, but Ryan says that there is a system that Vanessa has worked out. So Vanessa, could you just let us know what you think?
There is a system. Going into a meeting, typically we don't actually have very many members who are not in good standing who attend. So if there is a member who's not in good standing who does attend, I'm aware of who they are and I can factor in if they're voting or not. We haven't had very many on the cusp votes, so it hasn't come into play. But, you know, for example, if we have a vote where only 2 people are not in approval, I'll make notes of that in the meeting minutes, and if they were not in good standing, it would be noted that the vote didn't count.
I see Mary's hand. And you're muted.
The other SWABs don't have community board members as slots for membership. The Queensborough president wanted to do that, and then the attorney made sure that that wouldn't hold up the quorum by adding that rule about members in good standing.
Thank you, Mary. And Gil, you make a really good point. You're absolutely right. And that's not something that we thought about. Whoever is that delegate ends up having to be at those community board meetings to report back. So again, this is just a draft, and what the bylaws committee can do is go back and try to address these issues and see if there's a way that we can reword it to make it a little bit clearer. If there are no more questions on this one, Ryan, could you go to the next change?
Yes, but I do see Vanessa's hand.
Okay, sorry, Vanessa.
Yeah, I was just gonna add for those who may not have looked at the bylaws in a little while, which is just for context. I think the old text did specify attendance, but it was sort of the flip. It said if you hadn't attended, if you had more than 3 unexcused absences, you weren't in good standing. So maybe I wasn't on the bylaws committee, but this is being put into the affirmative. So rather than saying you're not in good standing for not coming, it says you're in good standing for coming.
Exactly. So we'll move down here. And I'll let you. This is kind of a complement to this. We've and Susan, you can cut me off if you want to. Basically, just saying that this was just adding that there's the may recommend to the board the removal of any member who is not in good standing. Currently, what we have is substantial non-attendance. We didn't really know what that meant. There are some folks, you know, and this has also come up because the borough president's office is in the process of appointing new and reappointing folks to the board, and had asked about attendance and whatnot. So, you know, there are some folks who haven't come to any meetings or were involved at the beginning and kind of dropped off. And so our question with this, like the existing bylaws said that we may recommend removal if it includes substantial non-attendance. When that threshold is crossed was kind of a question that, at least in the executive committee, we didn't really know when that would be met to recommend someone. So we had just added this. It's still a may, and the goal wouldn't be to remove community board members. It would just be if other members are not in good standing. But this also is open to suggestions, and I'll turn it back over to Susan. We can stay here or move on if we've talked about this enough.
So I think Ryan just explained it. We just added, rather than removal of any member for cause, now it's removal of any member who is not in good standing or for cause, which may include substantial non-attendance. I can't necessarily see everybody on my screen right now, so if you have questions, just unmute and say I have a question.
Mary has her hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, we need people on here who are going to do some work, you know, who want to be on committees, who want to get something done. And so if there are people that are on here, organizations that are on here who can't do that, then we need to bring on organizations where you have people that want to get their hands into these issues. So, you know, it's not supposed to be exclusionary. We want to include and, you know, reach out for those people. So I think everybody understands what it means to have a healthy organization. and, you know, to have people who are participating are accountable. And this is trying to promote that, a positive thing.
Any other questions or comments? And I don't see anyone else. So Ryan, could you go down to the next change?
Yes. So we'll focus here.
So this one is about officer removal. Right now, officers shall serve for one year or until succeeded by a duly elected successor. No person shall serve more than 2 consecutive terms in each respective office. The proposed change is officers shall serve for 1 year or until succeeded by a duly elected successor or removed from office for cause, including neglect of duty in office, misconduct, or not attending executive committee meetings. The vote required to remove an officer is a majority vote of members in good standing when previous notice has been given. So there was no option if there is an officer that is not serving for removing that officer. And so we added, like we did for other members, we put in a clause for officer removal as well. Any questions on that?
So we have similar text for committee chair. Or I think, you know, the same text could apply for anybody holding a specific position.
Yep.
Yeah,
You're right,
we
Vanessa.
don't currently, but that's a
Yeah.
good point.
Vanessa, yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah. Yeah, that needs to maybe be added. But I agree, whatever we're asking of our members at large, we should also ask the same of our officers, even more so because they're the leaders of the board. So yeah, this is good stuff. It was worth the wait.
Any other questions or comments? So we will note that, Vanessa, and that will, you know, that will go into where it has the committees. We should have consistent language. I agree. Thank you. Then the next is about electronic voting between meetings. And right now, there is no option and no text in our bylaws about electronic voting between meetings. So what we've drafted is electronic voting may be used to vote on 1, a motion that was seconded and discussed at a full board meeting that did not meet quorum requirements. So of course, what that means is that we can talk and second a motion, but we can't vote on anything if we don't have a full quorum. Or 2, a motion that was seconded and discussed at any full board meeting when a subsequent motion passes to vote electronically to allow for further review outside of the meeting. So in that sense, that case, that is where people have discussed it. It's a motion that's been seconded. It's a full board meeting, but there's more information that someone has questions about. And so rather than wait until the next full meeting, especially if it's a timely issue, it means that that information can be conveyed by email and a vote taken electronically. Or 3, an urgent matter that arises between meetings and is discussed and voted on in a committee, in which case the chair of the committee notifies the chairperson, who will then call a vote of the full board. So for this, an example for this one would be the legislative committee, that there is some urgent issue that comes up, and we are asked to sign off on some very important letter about something that is very timely. The legislative committee discusses it and votes on it, and then the chair of the committee notifies the chairperson, and then the chairperson calls for that vote. So what it means is that it's not something where somebody can just come up and say, we should have a vote on this. It's got to come up through the committee. Electronic votes shall be taken by email, and at least 24 hours shall be allowed for members to cast their ballot. So that is our recommendation for voting between meetings, electronic voting between meetings. I think we've all seen that there have been times where we've had to delay something because we haven't had a quorum, or we've had to delay something for multiple meetings because we're waiting for information and we have to wait until the next scheduled meeting. Or if there's something really urgent that comes up, we have no option, no way to deal with it. So these are the 3 reasons why we thought electronic voting could be used. And with that, do people have questions?
Yes, Susan, I'm a little fuzzy on that last sentence. So what if our quorum normally at a meeting is, let's say it's 15, but only 10 people voted? You sent it out by email, only 10. How does that work in terms of, because we didn't make quorum, a quorum doesn't matter in on electronic voting. I'm just trying to get a sense here.
I think electronic votes, if we had one of these three situations that were happening and we sent out and tried to take a vote by electronic mail, anybody who was not in good standing, their vote would not count. Anybody who is in good standing, their vote would count. So that anyone who's in good standing has attended the number of meetings that they're supposed to attend.
Right.
Majority rules. If we have a
Okay.
majority vote for the quorum, then that motion passes. If we
Okay.
don't have a majority, then it does not pass.
Okay, so it's just majority rules. Okay. All right.
But with people
But I do think,
that can vote.
I think, yeah, and I think at that point, we should specify that, because it says earlier in the bylaws for voting during meetings, it specifies a majority of members in good standing. I think it would be helpful to clarify that here as well. So thanks for raising that. I see Adam has his hand.
I think those number 1 and number 2 are fantastic because it's slowed us down so much in decision making. I think number 3 is the tricky one because and it deserves a conversation, because we could have proposals that come from committee to privatize the sanitation department and let's have a vote on it and no discussion. And those aren't, when you have heavy topics, you want to have a full conversation, but it really is a trade-off with timing, because all of our experience so far has been that we've been waylaid in making decisions because we couldn't vote. I think, there was a recent one where Ryan and I had an exchange with all the Manhattan and Brooklyn SWAB had a proposal and some language for testimony today. And, one of the things was that taxpayers would subsidize the tip fees for private haulers at city-owned marine transfer stations. And, on that exterior, it's like, okay, well, it seems, it seemed like maybe some people could see that as vanilla ice cream, but other people could see that as licorice. And, that kind of topic really needs a big discussion. So I don't know how you create that balance.
And so what we wanted to have some type of an option if there was something urgent that came up. And we needed to have some kind of wording because, and I don't know that we've had something that is so urgent that it needs to be voted on immediately between meetings. Actually, maybe there was something a year or two ago and we just didn't have it together to be able to do it. So we wanted to have something, we wanted to have a way to vote on something that came up between meetings that had an urgent timing issue. But we did want to have there be some type of discussion, which is why we decided to put it through committee. And the committee might decide this is going to require, and that's going to be the balancing act. The committee can say, you know what, there's a lot of information that's needed here. Maybe there would be a discussion that happens by email where people say, I need more information about this, or there may not be enough votes because people say there's not enough information, in which case it doesn't get voted on. If it's a timely matter, it doesn't get approved, but it does get taken to the next meeting. So if there's a better or a clearer way that we can do it, I think what we really want to have is we want to have an option to vote between meetings if there's something that is really timely.
Yeah, I totally agreed. I think it just so would there be notification of the committee meeting ahead of time so that you would allow people to opt in to participate in the discussion?
I would think so. So let's give an example. Let's say that there is a discussion where there's going to be we want to present testimony to the mayor's office or the borough president's office about a legislation for composting in public schools, right? But it has to be done by, March 15th, which is before our next meeting. And so the legislative committee says, you know what, this is something we really need to take a stand on. And the legislative committee might hold a special meeting and open it to everybody in QSWAB and say, you know what, there's this urgent issue that has just come up. And we have the option to putting some kind of a letter together, but we need full QSWAB approval. So the legislative committee is going to have this meeting on this night. Please join us if you'd like to join the discussion. And then there would be that meeting. The committee would then make a decision about whether or not this is something that they wanted to bring up for vote to make it by that March 15th meeting or by that March 15th deadline. So that's just an example. And I think what we would want is everybody would want information in advance. It's just hard to predict what that urgent matter might be, but there needs to be a forum for people to get that information. And it can't just be people randomly saying, I'd like to take a vote on something silly. So it needs to come through committee. So there is some discussion. And the committee structure is how we usually bring matters up before the full committee. So
in number 3, could we insert before, discussed and voted in a committee and add some language in there with prior notice about the committee meeting? So what's that wording, that verbiage that we could use so that, it's an urgent matter, the legislative committee is going to hold a meeting, and we're going to notify the whole group, and if you go, that's fine. And then the committee would then recommend to the general board that we take a vote on this.
I just think it becomes a longer where we have more procedure in here. So an urgent matter that arises between meetings and is discussed and voted on in a committee meeting, which is made publicly available to all members of QSWAB.
Yeah, committee meetings are always open to the public. It's never been closed. The meetings on our committee meetings are never closed. We have folks from other SWABs that join the meeting. I mean, it's
different topic.
Yeah.
It's just that if there's an urgent issue, then that the committee is going to hold a meeting to talk about it and approve it to the general group.
Right, but that notice still goes out.
But they might.
You might not know. Like if you're not on the legislative committee, for example, and something has come up in which the legislative committee is planning on drafting something, I think the point Adam's making is that you might not go to that meeting because you don't normally go to the legislative committee meeting. And then if during that committee meeting is when the discussion happens and then it's put before the board, then people not on the legislative committee haven't necessarily been given notice. And so I think the idea is we would just want like the chair of the committee to send out an email to the listserv saying, we're having our legislative meeting. We're going to be discussing an issue that's likely going to be put before the full board before our next meeting. This is what the issue is. If you want to add comments, and I think we've done that, but I think having language in here would be helpful to make sure that
I'm just going to say that I think this is more about we are having a special meeting of the legislative committee to discuss this urgent topic. Right. And so people know that, yes, on this day, we're always going to have this legislative committee. It's open to everybody, but there would be special notice that would be sent out that there is an urgent issue and we're holding a special meeting outside of what our usual schedule is to make sure that everyone is notified about it. And I would think it would also make sense to give at least a couple of sentences background about why this urgent committee meeting is happening. So, and I think, is Adam, am I conveying that correctly? Is that what you're trying?
Right on. Yeah.
Okay. So
I just want to say that, Susan, I just want to say that there's been no legislative committee meeting since I've been holding them that wasn't noticed to the full board. I'm not sure what happened prior to that. And
even prior to that,
no meeting would ever, no meeting would be held that where notice wasn't given to the full board.
Okay, I understand that, but I think what we're saying is that if there was a special meeting that had to be held, there would be some, rather than just the regular legislative committee, which is every other Tuesday, it's like we are calling a special meeting to discuss topic X, which is a very urgent issue, and we are going to be, discussing it and proposing a potential vote. So everybody's aware, because I may not go to a legislative committee meeting because I don't usually, right? But if
No, but
understand-
I think that has already been done. I don't see any problem with putting in here some words to the effect like voted on in a committee meeting for which notice has been given to the full board. Okay, I don't see any problem with that, but that in fact has been the procedure, I believe, also for special meetings.
Yes, I agree with Mary. That's the procedure. You never send out notice on a meeting, committee meeting, without serving that notice to the full board. That's
Yeah.
a given.
Yes.
Thank you, Vanessa, for putting that in the chat. I think that's the spot on about what we've been talking about.
I see Gil has his hand raised.
I mean, I don't notify people. I tell Ryan and he sends out a notice because that's the procedure we've been using.
I think, Mary, the issue is not, the issue is about letting people know that this is the issue that's going to be discussed at this meeting, rather than just the planning committee is going to hold its regular meeting.
Right,
Or the
I get it,
legislative committee is
I
gonna
get it.
hold its regular meeting, so.
I get it, it's a special meeting, but I'm just saying that if any meeting of a committee is held,
Right.
Ryan sends out that notice
Yeah,
to everyone.
exactly.
And
And I
that's
think that was
what it-
understood. That was
Yeah.
understood in our process, that
Right.
if there's a meeting of any sort, if it's a special meeting or if it's a regular monthly meeting, it was understood. It goes out to the board at large.
There have
So
been
then,
no,
so then what we're talking about is there's a legislative committee meeting. It's the regularly scheduled meeting. I
No.
don't attend because I never attend the legislative committee meetings. And then suddenly I'm being asked to vote on a topic that I didn't know was going to be included at the legislative committee.
there
And
are
so
no legislative committee meetings for which notice of the meeting is only sent to people who come to the legislative committee.
I understand what we're saying, and I'm just going to read here what was written. In an
Okay.
urgent matter that arises between meetings for which the following process is followed, the committee must notify full SWAB membership that the urgent matter will be discussed and voted on in the upcoming committee meeting with the intention of recommending the matter for an electronic vote. If the
Okay.
vote passes in committee, et cetera. So it's not about the public notice, it's about letting people know that this is a topic, an urgent topic that is going to be discussed. So
Right.
that people understand it's not just the regular legislative or the regular planning or the regular whatever committee meeting. It's about this specific topic so
Got
that
it.
people have a better understanding.
Okay, now the
Right.
only other problem here is that as a committee chair, I don't send out notice. Ryan has been sending out notice.
I think we can work with the specifics of that. I think the important issue is just that this notice gets out, whether it's coming from the committee chair or the chairperson. We can talk on, but Gil has his hand raised, so I wanna call on Gil.
Thank you, Ryan. I think that great discussion. I think this is important. I'll just add that if there is an urgent matter that arises and an emergency meeting is needed from any committee, and this decision is put out to a vote electronically, I would just ask that the notes from that committee meeting and the discussion about this be included, and people are really encouraged to read that discussion. I also agree that it's really important to have discussion. I agree with what Adam said earlier. Some things might seem vanilla to you, but they are licorice to somebody else. And it gets touchy whenever we start having votes without actually having a discussion where people not in that committee can ask questions and fully understand the issue. That said, I also want to I think it's important for us to be in solidarity with our committees. If we don't fully understand the issue, we need to have trust that our committee members that are focused on these issues are making good decisions and guiding us in a good way.
Here, I agree, because we're thinking that the people who are serving on various committees have a better understanding, and that is typically how a board operates, is that there are committees, the committees have all the detailed discussions, and then they make recommendations to the board, often with a memo that says, this is what we're recommending for these reasons, and this is the background. And I think, Gil, that's what you're suggesting, which makes sense, because there has to be some context. You can't just be asked to vote on something.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Real quickly, where you have matter will be discussed and voted on, I think it should be changed to say and may be voted on. Because at the end of the day, after the discussion, we may decide not to do a vote. So I don't, yeah, just, I think we should put there may be voted
Good
on.
point.
well, except that electronic voting may be used to vote on these 3 areas. And so this is where we're saying that there would be a vote, right? To vote on an urgent matter. And so this is one of the instances where there would be a vote, where we could use electronic voting.
Yeah, but I hear that. You could go into a meeting planning to vote and not vote and table. So
But I
why
understand.
make it so definitive?
Because we're saying that these are the 3 times where we may use electronic voting to vote on something. 1, which is this motion where there's not a quorum. 2, which is there's a motion and there's more information needed. And 3 is when a committee says they've discussed something and they're asking us to vote. Those are the 3 times we may have voting. If we want to have a whole separate section on committees, and we can do that, but these
No.
are the 3 times we're saying that voting can happen.
I'll let it go, by all means.
But I mean, we could turn 3 into something.
I'm just
totally
nervous
different.
about putting that, because then it puts someone in a position where, even though at the end of the day, we may decide not to vote, it's in the bylaws saying we have to call a vote.
Well,
So
no,
now
it's
we have
not,
to call a
because
vote.
there may be an urgent matter that arises between meetings that's discussed on,
said
and the
voted
committee
on.
decides not to vote on it, in which case it would not come up for an electronic vote.
Okay.
This is only if it is approved by a committee to be voted on.
Okay.
So yeah, it would not come up to a vote if the committee says, no, we don't think it makes sense. Let's wait till the next full SWAB meeting.
All right. So we gave the notice, right? We're having this meeting. And at that point in time, in that notice, are we saying that we will be voting on something, or we may be voting?
The notice that goes out, it says, we are having this discussion and we may vote, but we're not voting on it unless that committee agrees that we're voting on it, in which case now in our bylaws, it says, if this instance happens and the committee has had a discussion and wants to vote on it, our bylaws say that we can vote electronically.
The first sentence here in this change says electronic voting may be used to vote. It doesn't explicitly say that we must. It says it may be used in these 3 circumstances.
Yeah.
That's right. And
Where are you seeing that it's requiring us to do that?
I am seeing where Ryan just highlighted, the committee must notify full SWAB membership that the urgent matter will be discussed and voted on. And what I'm saying is we should say and may be voted on, because we haven't had the discussion yet.
Well,
And we haven't voted on it.
If there's
But
an
we're bringing
important,
it into it's an urgent matter. We're bringing it in. But at the end of the day, we may then opt not to vote based on discussion.
That's
So-
right, in which case it would not be up for electronic voting. That's absolutely correct. It
Right,
would then not be up for
Yeah.
electronic voting, but if we decide, we have something in our bylaws that says that we can vote on it electronically. So
I
there's
love
3
it. I love it.
instances.
I like what Ryan just did there. You put maybe in parentheses. Great. That works.
Great. Okay. Just cognizant of time, where we have about 5 minutes left. Are there any other pressing issues? Again, the intention is that the bylaws committee will meet again to go over these comments. We can send out information ahead of time. We have to set a date, but we can send out information if folks want to join to further these discussions. But before we close, are there any other last comments anyone wants to make about these proposals?
Job well done, bylaws committee.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you. And thank you, Susan, for presenting these changes for us. So really quickly, I want to give folks yes, we can talk about that, but I want to give folks the chairs a quick minute to give some updates. So why don't we start? Mary, do you want to just give a quick update on legislative committee?
Sure. I'd say that the highlights are that there are some EPR bills in play now in Albany. Governor Hochul presented a bill. Senator May has a bill. She also has the bottle bill, and Senator Harckham has a bill. So there's been legislative committee contact with from some of the from the Manhattan SWAB and the Brooklyn SWAB, and there will be more of that. In the area of extended producer responsibility and the bottle bill. And the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. It looks like the final vote for the disadvantaged communities mapping will be tomorrow. It's a kind of an unfortunate situation there where the arbitrary nature of some of what's gone on is become very apparent, and there's been total resistance to any kind of two-way communication. So I don't know what's going to happen exactly, but it's not really a good outcome from the standpoint of the state's process. So, that's unfortunate. And I wanted to thank Bilal Key of the Environmental Justice Committee for the work that he did, both with the Climate Justice Working Group staff, Alana Tuckey, Kendall Tuckey, and also with We Act, and then having We Act come. I think that was very, very important in surfacing the problems that should now be very apparent to everyone. The other thing is that the Westchester Alliance for Sustainable Solutions is trying to close down a Wheelabrator incinerator. They are seeking organizational and individual support, and for that, they came to a I don't know, it was an MSWAB or Brooklyn SWAB meeting. So that's my report.
Thank you, Mary. Why don't we go with Bilal on the environmental justice, and then we'll close with the communication education. So Bilal, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Ryan. Good evening, everyone. We did meet as the Environmental Justice QSWAB committee, and we have agreed that every third Friday moving forward will be our meeting date from now until the end of the organizational year, fiscal year. So look for that every third Friday at 7 o'clock. We will be meeting here on Zoom. So our next meeting will be the March 17th. So please mark your calendars. Some of the things that we did go over, other than that, is I have joined the multi-SWAB committee for NYCHA recycling to represent the committee, Environmental Justice Committee, and also the SWAB, which is open to more members of QSWAB and everyone want to hop on those meetings to learn more about the efforts being put forth in reference to NYCHA's participation in recycling. And definitely one of the goals of the Environmental Justice Committee is to look into what is the holdup between NYCHA and the city in terms of the composting efforts that's going on. And now with it going all citywide, not involving the largest landowner in the city would be a missed opportunity greatly, and we will not be able to achieve that goal as a city and composting our food scraps. So we're going to be looking into that as well. We did talk a little bit about the DEC, Mary and everyone with the disadvantaged communities, just gave a recap. on that where we are. I was not aware at the time of when that exact meeting would be taking place. So thank you for sharing that it will be taking place tomorrow. It is unfortunate that it does not seem like they're going to budge with it, but I want to thank everyone's efforts. We did submit testimony. We got support from the borough president. The fight is not over. I gather that this will continue onward with this fight, with this disadvantaged communities mapping. So stay tuned for more updates on that, but that is my report for right now.
Great, thanks so much. And I'll turn it over to Jenny and Janet to talk about the Education and Communications Committee.
Hey, so this is Janet, and I just wanted to, again, yeah, so the Communication Committee and Education Committee were, yeah, every Thursday, the third month at 6:30 p.m. And since, you know, with the bandwidth that we have, we kind of just highlighted like what our goals will look like now that we combine our committees, you know, definitely about the website, looking for that website coordinator role, you know, having more information on the committee's maintenance and improvements. And if there's any big topics of discussion, especially since, you know, spring's coming up around the corner, is it'll definitely be about compost and or you know, organic waste. You know, definitely marketing the start date for the curbside composting on March 27th. And then of course, bringing the resources from the education side, kind of re-educating everybody, kind of getting that refresh on how to properly compost, whether it's like industrial or to your local, you know, food scrap off. And then also like there's like, you know, we see that there's like compost giveaways, volunteering events. We're seeing like internships coming up from like the Queens Botanical Gardens, master compost program. And then just in general, just like looking into outreach. That'd be like our third one, just whether it's like in person or virtual. I know when I spoke with Chelsea from the Queens Botanical Garden, like she mentioned, you know, if you guys ever interested in doing like in-person events, like they kind of open their doors to us if we were to do anything, you know, in person that they could like welcome to host. So that's something to think about. And also, I've attended, I don't know if anyone else here attended, but like the zero waste, I kind of sent the link, zero waste workshop. They have great panel discussions. And it'll be interesting, just kind of think about what we could talk about if we did like a collaborative thing, for example, and like what those topics will look like, what the panel, who we invite. And I think that would bring even like more awareness and maybe, you know, kind of recruiting people. Because again, we have this, you know, red thread of just that common, or green thread, I would say, of, you know, just like environmental, you know, conscious of how we could, you know, participate and bring in more volunteers and education about like what Queens SWAB does. So I think that's something that we could look into. And if there's anything I missed, Jenny, let me know, or if anything you want to add on your end.
No, I think that sounds good. Thanks, Janet.
Great, perfect. Thank you. Thank you both so much. And I know that some folks from the planning committee will be migrating over to you all. Great, thank you, and thank you everyone for staying a couple of minutes past close. But I think this was a really great discussion, and so I appreciate everyone's feedback and thoughts on both our work in committees as well as the proposals to change the bylaws. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Or we can stay.
Motion to adjourn.
See Mary, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Oh,
Perfect. I think that was a late one. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Bye.